Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Bava Kamma daf Pei Gimel. We're going to finish the chapter of Bava Kamma and begin the eighth parak, the eighth chapter. So hold on just a second. I'm going to share my screen, and I got us all set up here to go. All right. So in the final Mishnah that we learned a few days ago, it was back on I think Ayin Tedem Bet. But we noted that there's a prohibition to raise dogs unless they're tied up with a chain. And that's because, well, we're actually going to see it. But in general, the idea is that we're talking about wild animals, wild dogs, and they're dangerous. So we're going to begin with the two dots that are 16 lines down on Pei Gimel Amud Aleph, which is where we left off yesterday. Dove always seems to make excellent progress. And so we'll pick up there as really a new topic. So we're going to have a little bit of Rashi and a little bit of Tosos, but we'll have a rush today. That will be nice. So, okay. But in any event, we'll get to that in a little while. But let's get to this. So with the Gemara quotes the Mishnah, Lo Yigadel, no, Simons. So Lo Yigadel Adam es hakelev, Ela im kain kashor b'shal shalaos. That if you're going to raise a dog, you need to have it tied up. And so Tan Rabbanan, we're going to qualify this by noting that there is a circumstance when maybe you don't want your dogs tied up. And let's hear it. So we have it in a brisa. Lo yigadel adam es hakelev ela im kain kashur b'shal sheles. That again, you should only raise a dog if it's tied up with a chain. Aval megadel hu be'ir hasamucha l'sfar. But you can raise it in a city that is close to the border because obviously you want to be able to protect the border. And what animal is good at protecting areas? Dogs. Dogs are good at protecting areas. And so as a result, the kosher biyom umatiru balayla. And so what you would do is you would tie it up during the day when you're out and you don't need to worry about enemies attacking because you know that you will see them coming. And so as a result, you're not worried about it. But at night, when you won't see them coming because you're sleeping in your bed, you want to have the dogs out there protecting the territory. So, and Tanya, we got a related teaching. Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol Omer Hamagadol Kilavim Kimagadol Chazirim. That when we said that you shouldn't raise dogs, so actually Rabbi Eliezer says in a brisa that raising dogs is like raising pigs. Well, why does that make a difference? So Lamai Nafkamina, what difference does it make? The Gemara wonders. So Lamekim Ale Ba'ar. The idea is that when we said that we said before that one who raises pigs is considered cursed, and so as a result, that's why Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol said that we should compare dogs to pigs because the point is that if you raise a dog, it's also you should deserve being cursed. So, and we still haven't quite seen what's so bad about raising dogs. We'll see that in a moment. Amar Rav Yosef Bar Manyumi, Amar Rav Nachman. So Rav Yosef Bar Manyumi says in the name of Rav Yachanan, Bavel Ki'ir Hasmucha L'Sfar Dami. That Bavel, now at the moment we assume that this means the entire region of Bavel, the entire area of Babylonia. But we then is like a border area, but Targama Naharda. But actually, we should interpret this as Naharda. So take a look at Rashi Bavel. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down, beginning of the line, Bavel. Shema Medina, that is the name of a state, of Bavel. The Irachat Sheba, but really it's one city that's inside Nikraat Naharda. That's called Naharda. The Ota Ha'ir, and that city, Smuchel Asvar, that's close to the border. The Ashma'in and Rav Nachman, and what Rav Nachman is teaching, because again, this was a teaching that Rav Yosef Bar Manyumi said in the name of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman was teaching Da'hoel v'yesh beBavel Yeshuv Kavua, because Bavel has sort of like a fixed community, a few fixed settlement, the Yisrael Harbe, and lots of Jews there. Mutter legadel klavim be'ir hasmucha l'svar. You can have dogs raised in this city Naharda that's close to the border because we want to protect the Jews in the area. Ki'ilu he marries Israel. So as a result, and therefore we can treat it as if it was like the land of Israel, like a border of the land of Israel. So that's the idea. I thought that was an interesting thought that Rashi has. So the bottom line is that we allow the raising of dogs when we're in a situation where the dogs are necessary for protection. So, Darish Rabbi Dostai Demin Biri. So we have Rabbi Dostai from Biri, explain something, and that is going to teach us. We're going to now have two stories of how dogs can cause miscarriages by scaring pregnant women, and why that's so important. So, story number one. Uvenucho Yomar Shuva Hashem Rivos Alfei Yisrael. That this is a pasuk in Bamidbar, in Parshas Naso, that talks about when we bring is it Naso or is it Baloscha? Could be Baloscha. Now I'm getting myself confused, but in any event, it's Parak Yud in Sefer Bamidbar, and in the Torah, we're told what was said when after the ark came to rest after the camp moved. Yomar, that when it came to rest, Shuva Hashem Ruvos Alfei Yisrael. The Moshe would say that return Hashem to the myriads and thousands of Israel. So, and what is Rivavos? Well, Rivavos is a myriad. A myriad is 10,000, but it's Rivavos. It's plural, so it's 10,000s. Well, the minimum of any plural number is 2, and so 2 10,000s. That's 20,000. And then Alfei is also plural. It's thousands, and so the minimum of thousands is also 2. So again, it would be 22,000. So Lulamedcha she'ein shchina shora al Yisrael pagos mishnei alafim ushnei rivavos. So we see that the Hashem's presence, will only rest on the Jewish people when there are 22,000 Jews. So chasar achat. What happens if you're missing one? V'haisa isha uberes beinehen, and then there is a pregnant woman. So here, this pregnant woman will give birth, and as soon as she gives birth, now all of a sudden we'll have the full 22,000. Uru'uya lahashlim, and we'll end up finishing the number, and we'll end up getting to 22,000. But then the navach bakelev v'hapila, but a dog will bark at her, and now she'll have a miscarriage. V'nimtza zegorem l'shchina shetistalik miYisrael. Turns out that a dog will end up preventing Hashem's presence from being in with the Jewish people. So the bottom line is that we're worried about this. Now, this seems like an awfully unlikely situation, but the point is that even in such case, we should be worried about it. But now we're going to have a more direct incident that highlights both how dogs can be scary. Are you scared of dogs? I'm sometimes scared of dogs. So how dogs can, some dogs we don't like, exactly. So some dogs. So the point is that here we're going to talk about a dog that turns out not to have been able to do any biting, and we'll find out why in a moment. But yet it can still be scary. So it's the alas lemefa bahu besa. A woman went to a house in order to bake some bread. A dog barked at her. So Amrle Mare, the owner of the dog, said to her, Lo tistave mine, don't worry about the dog. This dog is so gentle, so kind, so wonderful. And not only that, but shikuli nive, I've removed its big teeth. So Amra lay, so she said to the guy, Shikile tuivusach v'shadya achizrei, that we can remove the thanks for you, the good that you've done should be removed because and it should be thrown onto thorns. Why? Because Kvargnad Vlad, because my child, the it turns out this woman was pregnant, has already left its place, meaning she's already had her miscarriage. So she's realized that once you're scared, it doesn't make a difference. You can go to a scary movie and it scares you. The fact that it's a movie and there's nobody there that can actually do anything against you, that doesn't make a difference because it's a scary movie. You got scared. So anyway, so the bottom line is that we should be careful about raising dogs in a way that could scare others. It's very not good to scare people, especially somebody who's pregnant. Okay. Ein Porsin Nishpin Leonim. We said in that Mishnah, in the last Mishnah, the last teaching was that we don't put out nets for doves within 30 reis of an area that is settled. And 30 reis is about 8,000 amot. So we're going to take a look and see. Umi azle kule high. Well, 1 second, 8,000 amot is pretty far. Do we really need to worry about doves traveling that far? Because we are going to have a Mishnah in Maseches Bava Basra, which says, "V'hatanan marchikin es hashova min ha'ir chamishim ama." That the only distance that you need to separate a dovecote, meaning where doves live, from a city, is 50 amot. So why do you need to worry about doves traveling 8,000 amot? So Amar Abaye, Mesha Shaite Tuva. No, look, doves can fly. We know that doves can fly a long distance. But they fill their stomachs, meaning when the dove is at its home, where is it going to do most of its eating? It's going to do most of its eating within 50 amos of its home. And so as a result, when it comes to setting up the home, so then we need to make sure that it doesn't go, that the home is set away from a city 50 amos so that it doesn't eat people's crops. But when it comes to preventing us from trapping a dove, then we have to worry about it traveling 8,000 amos. Well, 1 second. Now let's go in the other direction. Do doves only travel 30 reis, meaning 8,000 amos and not more? But Tanya, we have a brisa that says the yishuv, when we're dealing with a settled area, afilu meya mil lo yifros. Now 8,000 amos is 4 mil. 4 is less than 100. So why do we need to worry? So in our Mishnah, we said you can't spread out a net within 4 mil of a city, of a settled area. But in this brisa, we say that you can't put out a net within 100 mil of a settled area. So 25 times more space. So Rav Yosef Amar Yishuv Kramim. We're talking about in the situation where you can't put out a net even within 100 mil. That's talking about where we've got lots of vineyards, where we were talking about a settlement of vineyards. Rabba Amar B'Yishuv Shovachin, right? Where we're talking about where there are lots of shovachs, where there are lots of dovecotes. So there are lots of, the bottom line in both cases, there are lots of places for the doves to rest and eat. And so as a result, it's in those situations where we need to be worried about the doves flying more than 4 mil. Now, well, 1 second. If we're going to be worried about dovecotes as that situation where we have lots of dovecotes, and that's where and Rabbah, according to Rabbah's answer, well, that's a problem because of course you can't set it up. Let's think about in our mind. We have a series of dovecotes let's say, every meal. And so as a result, you have 100 dovecotes. And we're telling you that you can't put a dovecote within 100 mil of the first one.
Right.
But why would you ever come to that situation? What about the 100th one that is only 1 meal away from you, right? You're telling me you can't put it next to the within 100 meal of the first one, but that first one, in order for the us to be worried about 100 meal, we have to be talking about where there are lots and lots of dovecotes between that 100 meal and the original one. So as a result, what about the closer ones? Why wouldn't you be worried about those? Meaning, it's not the 100th meal that's going to matter. It's the 4 meal from the closest one that's going to matter. So we're going to give 3 different answers for that. So, well, we could just be talking about non-Jews owning the dovecotes that are the closer ones. And that's why we're not worried. Now, you may say, well, 1 second, don't we have to worry about, after all of these dovecotes, all this distance is being set up so that we avoid the possibility of stealing. Well, stealing from a non-Jew is also prohibited. So yes, that's true. Sure. Yes, that's true. But if in fact that the dovecotes are owned by a non-Jew, so shouldn't we not want to steal from them also? So the answer is, of course, yes. We want to avoid stealing from them. But the difference is that we're not for sure going to be engaging in stealing. This is only effectively a way of ensuring that we don't steal. So yes, ordinarily, if you know that a dove belongs to the non-Jew, you can't, of course, take it. But you would be allowed to set up a dovecote in a place where you might end up getting a dove from the non-Jew. So as a result, it's only the stricture that is applicable. So that's answer number 1. So maybe the ones that are closer are owned by non-Jews. Or we could say that the ones that are closer have no owner associated with them. Or you could say that the person himself that wants to set up the net to catch more doves owns the ones that are the closer ones. So the bottom line is if I own numbers 2 through 99, and so as a result, the person who owns number 1 could end up, seems very unlikely, but could end up having one of his doves fly over all the way over to my 100th dovecote. And as a result, if I set up a net near my 100th dovecote, I might end up catching the doves that belong to the owner of dovecote number 1. Therefore, I'm not going to be allowed to set it up. So those are the 3 answers. And Hadron alach maruba, Hadron alach maruba, Hadron alach maruba. So we finished the 7th chapter of Bava Kamma. And now we dive in directly into the 8th chapter, and we begin the 8th chapter with the idea, which is going to address the 5 forms of monetary compensation that one must pay when one injures another person. So let's take a look. So, and now what's interesting is that we're going to deal here. We dealt last chapter. Again, last chapter was dealt with Gneva, and now we're going to deal with actual injuries, and then we're going to go to Gezela. The best. So why don't we have? You might have thought we should talk about 2 different forms of stealing next to each other, Geneva and Gezela, but we interrupted because Geneva was really about the 4 times and 5 times damages, which are penalties. Well, we'll see that some of these additional forms of liability for injuring somebody are also viewed as penalties. And so as a result, that's why it makes a lot of sense for us to jump in from one form of penalty to another. So you injured somebody. You're going to be liable for 5 different things. So let's take a look and see what they are. Oh, I should have indented these next 4 by again. So the number 1 is nezek. Number 2, which is the actual damage, and we're going to see that how is that calculated? It's the value of a slave now and before the wound. So it's you calculate the difference between the value of a slave now and before the wound, before it was wounded. So bitzar, that's pain, and we'll see that that's going to be that you charge somebody how much someone like this person would accept to suffer this particular pain. The ripui, healing. So that is, we're going to see how much does it cost to heal the person of any resulting illness until the person's fully healed. B'shevet, unemployment, how much the person loses from being unable to watch cucumbers. We're going to see that why do you focus on cucumbers as opposed to the person's original job? Because the damager already paid for the specific wound as a result of the nezek. And boshes, the embarrassment, how much the person is embarrassed, and that will depend on the people. So let's dive into the different 5 different categories. Benezek, Ketzad, how do we determine damage? Sime, as you poked out the guy's eye, you blinded the guy's eye. So kata es yado, or you cut off his hand. She bears ragla, you broke his leg. Rowan oto iluhu eved nim karbashuk. You see whether or not he is treat him like a servant in the marketplace. The shaman Kamma haya yafe, and you see how much he's worth. But Kamma hu yafe, and how much haya yafe, but Kamma hu yafe, how much he was worth, and how much he's worth now. And Rashi notes, top Rashi, Shaharei Heziku Vihivsidu Mamonzeh, that this difference is the amount of loss that you cause to the person. She'im Haya Nitzrach, because if he wanted to, Haya Mocher Atzma Be'ebed Ivri, he could have sold himself as a Jewish slave. So you can see here that from Rashi's perspective, we're focused on the actual potential loss that the person suffered, because how much could he have sold himself? Now, the Rush here has a problem with this approach, because this approach, of course, when you sell yourself as a Jewish slave, you do not sell yourself permanently. You sell yourself just for 6 years. So I don't understand, the Rush says, this would not be the full amount of the damages that he suffered, because after all, the way to measure your full amount of damages is what would the profit be associated with owning yourself, essentially, now and before. And so he says, don't view it as if you sold yourself as an Eved Ivri. View yourself as if you sold yourself as an Eved Kanani, as a permanent slave. And so as a result, that is a very important difference between the two, and highlights a distinction between, are we focused on the actual loss that the person has, that's what the Rush is focused on, or do we focus on the theoretical loss that the person would have if he actually had the opportunity to sell himself, which of course he can only sell himself as an Evet Ivri, so that's the only loss that Rashi focuses on. So that's an interesting debate. All right, so that is nezek, that's damage, tsar, pain. So back into the Mishnah. It's now right at the 2 dots, 6 lines down. Tsar. So what is tsar? Kva'o b'shapud masmer. If you burn the guy with a spit or a nail, or you injured him with a nail, va'afilu, with like a hammer and nail, not the nail of your body. Va'afilu al tziparno, and even if you injured him on the nail, it's interesting that pun, which doesn't exist in Hebrew, effectively is raised by the reference to nails and nails. But in any ways, makom she'enu osa chabura, which is a place where the person doesn't actually have a wound that necessarily shows, certainly not over time. Still, omdin kama adam kiyotza bezeh rotza lito liot mitzdarka. We figure out how much a person like this guy, how sensitive is this person, how much would he be willing to accept? How much would a person in the marketplace that's like this guy be willing to accept? Because of course, if you ask this guy how much would he get, he's going to say, I wouldn't take, I'd take $27 million for that. Even though it was, the stick of a little pin. So the point is that, we have to go to the marketplace to figure it out. Anyway, so that's number 2. That's pain. Ripui, healing. So hiko chayav l'raposo. So if you hurt somebody, so then you gotta heal them. So Allah boat smakim. If the person, gets stores, so then im machmas hamaka chayav. If they are because of the wound that the fact that the guy got hit, well, then that's why he's going to be liable for it. Shalom machmas hamaka pater. And of course, if it's not because of the wound, well, then he's not liable. Chayisa v'nistera chayisa v'nistera. He gets a little better, and then it gets worse. Then he gets a little better, and it gets worse. So each time, chayav l'rapozo, he's still going to be obligated to try and heal the guy. Chayasa kol tzorko. But if it finally heals completely, well, then ein chayav l'raposo. If it then happens again, if the wound opens up, so then it's going to be considered that's a new wound. It's not going to be liable for the first guy who did the damage. Sheves. What about this loss of employment? Rowan oto keiluhu shomer kishuin. We look at the guy as if he was a watcher of cucumbers. Obviously, watcher of cucumbers, not something that's not a physical work, not physical labor, not something that's going to be very intensive. Pretty much anybody can do it. Because we saw earlier when we referenced cutting off the guy's hand or breaking his leg, we already paid him for that damage. So that is the story with Sheves. That's the unemployment payment. So Boshes, what about humiliation, embarrassment? Everything depends on who's doing it and who's the victim. Meaning, if and we'll see that there's actually a debate whether it's more embarrassing to be embarrassed by somebody who's more important or less important. But in any event, that we're going to see discussion of that more as we move forward. But the bottom line is, we've highlighted that you pay damages for when you damage somebody else. What don't we do? We don't seem to do what the Torah says. So the Gemara begins with that important question. Amai, why do we pay money? The Torah says, as does the Hammurabi Code, ayin takas ayin, an eye for an eye. Ema ayin mamish. Maybe it really means that we actually would take out the person's eye if he caused somebody else to lose their eye. So lo salka daita. Don't even think about that. So, and now we're going to offer a series of brisas and teachings that will highlight the fact that that in fact we're going to charge money. So we're going to do the first two today, and you'll have to stay tuned for the rest of them as we go forward. So lo salka daitach, again, Titania, don't think that we're going to pay cause somebody to lose their eye. It's going to be money, Titania, because we said I might have thought that if you blind somebody's eye, Misamayas no. Well, then we're going to blind your eye. Well, kata es yado, mikate es yado. That if you cut off somebody's hand, so then we're going to cut off that person's hand. You know, the damager's hand. Shiberes raglo, you break the person's leg. Mishaberes raglo. Well, then we'll break your leg. So Talmud lomar make adam umake behema. The Torah references the hitting of a person and the hitting of an animal, and they are referenced in juxtaposition with one another. So ma make behema the tashlumin. Just as when somebody hits an animal and causes damage to the animal, you have to pay for it. So too, if you hit a person, you end up having to pay for it. And if you want, you can also say, Harehu Omer, what does the Torah say? Lo tichu, and this is in Bamidbar, Lo tichu kofer lenefesh rotzeach asher hu rasha lamut. We should not accept here it defines it as ransom, but a compensation payment from a murderer that will allow the murderer who is the one who's deserving to die. So that it has been is an evil person that is deserving to die. So lenefesh rotzeach iata lokach kofer. What do we learn from this? We should learn from this that it's only a murderer that you can't accept a monetary payment. But we can accept a ransom payment from somebody who causes some part of the body to be injured. In fact, injured so much that it effectively dies, meaning if you cut off the limb, that limb will not regenerate. And yet, we're going to say that even in that situation where you've effectively made part of the person die, so to speak, indeed, if you cut off a whole limb, that we actually obligate that limb to be buried. It has some aspects of being dead. So therefore, and yet we're going to allow that person to pay monetary damages. So now the Gemara is going to question this brisa. And so, hi makeh. Which reference to makeh are you talking about? because we have to be very careful, because because if you're talking about the pasuk in Vayikra, Perek Chaf Daled, pasuk Kaf Aleph, that can't work, because where it says in that pasuk that if you hit an animal, you pay for it, and if you hit a person, you shall die. He's put to death. Because hahu b'katalakasiv, because that's talking about actual execution of the person, because we're talking about a situation where the person killed someone. So that doesn't work. Elamehacha. So rather we'll say it from here. Makei nefesh behema yishalmenu, nefesh tachat nefesh. That when it comes to somebody who kills an animal, we say that you should pay a life for a life. Now, even though it says nefesh tachas nefesh, it doesn't mean that you actually die. You have to pay money for it. Usmichle, and next to it, what do we say? V'ish ki tain mumba amito. We say that when a person puts gives a blemish into another person, so kasher asa ken yaselo, as was done to him, so shall you do to him. So as was done to the victim, you do to the perpetrator. So in second, and so as a result, we're going to say it's not clear in that situation what it is meant that you do to the perpetrator what was done to the victim. And we're going to say that just as the life for a life reference with respect to the animal, we're going to say that what should be done to the victim should be done to the perpetrator is going to mean also payment. Well, 1 second. There's a big problem, because we said in the Brisa, Make Adam, Make Behema, that we were going to juxtapose hitting a person and hitting an animal. But when we referenced this, the pasuk of a person doing damage to another person, the reference was ish ki yitain mumba amito, a person who wounds another person. There was no word makeh. We didn't have that word. So haylav makahu. We didn't say the word makeh at all. So haka kamrina. No, you're right that we didn't say haka, but we're going to say, and actually Rashi here uses the word gamrina. We can still learn one kind of hitting from another kind of hitting. As Rashi tells us, we're now in the Rashi 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, about 22, 23 lines up. It's really in the middle of the narrow lines of Rashi. Afal Gav is the last abbreviation at the end of the word of line. Afal Gav dekroy lo damu gamrin and zereshava. That even though the psukim are not comparable because they both don't reference makeh, we're going to still learn a zereshava. Kidatana debe Rabbi Yishmael, as the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael would do. Because what do? They actually learn a gzereshava of two different kinds of words. We have the shav hakohen, uba hakohen, be'erevin. That when in erevin we learned the gzereshava from the word shav, that a kohen will return and a kohen will come. That essentially, since both of them involve a kohen traveling, we're going to say that it's really all one idea, and we can learn one from the other. Umakei adam de katani hacha. And when we say in this brisa that we're going to talk about hitting a person, hakahu, it's a hitting to amar umaki yitain mum gamar, that we were referring to when you were to give a wound to somebody. Demum ayidei hakahu that when you have a wound, how does a wound come about? It comes about through hitting. And so as a result, we're going to say that even though the two psukim do not reference the actual word hitting, we can still have the gzereshava. So mahaka amura behema l'tashluma, and just as the hitting in connection with the animal refers to monetary payments, so too the avhaka hamura ba'adam l'tashluma. So too, when it comes to the person, it refers to monetary payment. V'haksiv, 1 second. V'ishkia can call nefesh adam most yumas. 1 second. We have a pasuk that actually references hitting, and says that the person is going to be put to death. So how can you explain this other pasuk? So b'mamon, it does not mean that you put the person to death. It's actually talking about paying money. Well, one second, how do you know that it's talking about money? Maybe it really should be death. So lo salkataytich, it shouldn't even enter your mind of that because of two reasons. Because one is, well, we can still connect this to the idea of makeh behema yishalmenu, that when you hit an animal, you pay for it. So as a result, we know that when you use the term makeh, it means money. The ode, ksiv basrei, we also have another teaching that we're going to see in a little while, the details of the teaching, but we're going to reference it here. Kasher yitain mumba adam kain yinasein bo. That when we say that you put a wound to somebody, so should be given to him. And we say that yinasein, that the idea of giving, meaning that we're learning from the fact that we're going to give the wound, that it means money. That because what do you give to people? You don't give people a hit. You don't give people a strike. You actually get, people get given money. You usually think of that as a positive. So ushma mina, and so as a result, we're going to learn from that it's talking about money. That the whole concept here is talking about money. And so as a result, we have successfully learned effort number one from our Mishnah to prove our situation. So now but we have a question, because we've now learned this all from the first teaching of our brisa. But our brisa then said, it said, "V'im nafshecha lomar." So what in the world was that referring to? Umay v'im nafshecha lomar. Why did we offer a second teaching in the brisa? What was wrong with the Gzeira Shava? So tuka kashalatana. So this was question over and over. This was asked. My chazit to yalafa mimake behema leila mimake adam. So so a second. So the point is that here's what's difficult. That why are you learning from hitting an animal? Learn from another place where it says hitting a person. So, and in that latter place where we actually quoted this, where we said, the ish ki yakeh kol nefesh adam mos yumas. Here we actually have hitting, and we say it's talking about putting to death. So why not say that we're talking about similarly wounding should be putting to death, and we should just kill that limb, so to speak. So Amre, so done in Nizikin and Nizikin. No, the point is that we should get injuries from injuries. The ain't done in Nizakim Mimisa. No, and we shouldn't learn injuries from death. But Adarabba, and obviously, therefore, we should learn injury to an animal. We should learn injury to a human from injury to an animal. But that doesn't make sense, because Adarabba, done in Adam Adam, ain't done in Adam Nehema. We should learn a person to a person and not a person from an animal. So Hainu de Katani. So that's why Im Nafshach Lomar. That's why the Brisa offered this second teaching, because we might have thought that the first teaching is not so good, because even though it seems to be a good Gzeira Shava, it does involve learning from an animal to a human, and we might want to learn only from humans to humans. So as a result, Haray Hu Omar Lo Tiku Kofer Lenefesh Rotzeach Asher Hu Rashal Amud Ki Mot Yumat. That when we say that when we say that you're not allowed to accept a payment from a murderer who deserves to die because he's supposed to die, we're learning that you don't end up taking from a murderer, but you will take from somebody who chops off limbs, even if they're not going to regenerate, even if we could consider those limbs to be dead. Well, one second. Are you telling me that this teaching of that you're not going to accept a ransom tells us that you're not going to accept payment from somebody who cuts off limbs? Haimi boile, we need this pasuk to teach us something else. The Amarachmana lo te'aved be tarti, that we have this concept that we don't force somebody to be subject to two penalties, meaning we don't make this person who's killed somebody subject to both monetary payments and the death penalty. Lo tishko minai mamonu tiktale. We don't actually take money from him and kill him. So no, that isn't learned from here. So we have a question of how do we learn this new lesson from this pasuk when we have another lesson that we have to learn from there? No, because hi mikadei rish aso naka, that we learn from the words in accordance with his wickedness, meaning that the point is that we only are going to chart only one wickedness are we going to punish somebody for, the but we're not going to punish them for two wickednesses, for one crime. So as a result, we're not going to subject somebody both to payment and to some other kind of penalty for a single crime. So in second, well, one second, but we still need the verse about lo tiku kofer lenefesh rotseyach, because we still need to teach us the underlying message. The ka'amarachmana lo tishko mamon v'tiftere. Otherwise, how do we know that you're not allowed to accept money from a murderer to allow him to escape penalty, to escape the physical punishment? So im kain, no, we could learn that from a different way, because if the Torah was only going to teach us that lesson, that we don't allow a guilty murderer to get off by paying money, because then the Torah could say, "Lichtov Rachmana lo tikul kofer la'asher hu rasha lamut." Just say that you're not going to accept ransom from the one who deserves to die. What does it mean, lenefesh rotseach? Why do we refer to the life of a murderer? Shma mina lenefesh rotseach yatal lokeach kofer. Only for a murderer, the life of a murderer, we're not going to accept. But we will accept a ransom payment for limbs that will not grow back. So if somebody were to cut off another person's finger, we might want to cut off that person's finger, but we'll say in that situation, we'll allow him to pay off the damage and thereby essentially ransom his own finger. Well, one second. Once we have this second teaching, and which seems to be a great teaching, why are you even bothering with the first teaching of that brisa? So Amre, they explained, if we only had the second teaching, Hava Mina, I might have thought, that a person, the perpetrator, would have the option to choose the situation. If he wanted to, he could give his actual eye, and if he wanted to, he could give the value of his eye. So if, in fact, for example, he was already blind in one eye, maybe he would be able to give an eye. Or if he had two eyes and he only blinded a person in one eye, maybe he's willing to be blinded and not have to pay the amount of damages. So maybe I might have thought that we should allow him to do that. So kamash malan min behema. That we learn it from an animal. So just as an animal tells us it's only monetary payment, so too when it comes to a person who hits another person, it's only going to be monetary payment. Okay, so that is proof number one. Very successful proof, and that on some level that's going to be our foundational proof. But the Gemara is not settled with that, because it wants to try. It has a number of other brises that are going to teach us the same lesson. So let's take a look at one more. So Tanya, Rabbi Dostai ben Yehuda Omer, ayin tachas ayin, mamon. That when it says an eye for an eye, it means money. Ata Omer mamon eno ella ayin mamish. How do I know that it's money and not actually the eye? So Amarta, you can say Haresha Haisa eno shalzek gedola ve'eno shalzek katana. Well, 1 second. What if one guy's got a big eye and one guy's got a small eye? How can I take away the guy's big eye for when he poked out a guy's small eye? It's not the same eye. Hatorah Amra Mishpat echad yelachem. Well, 1 second. So maybe, all right. So fine. When the eyes are of different sizes, so then we won't actually poke the guy's eye out. We'll make him pay money. And that'll be the rule. But the problem is the Torah says that there's one law for everyone. Mishpat hashev lekulchem. And this is not the same rule. Meaning, even though you could say that the rule is that the one rule is if it's the same size you get poked out, and if it's not the same size you poke out, you pay money. The bottom line is in its implementation, it's a very different situation. There's not one rule for everybody. It's going to depend. And in fact, of course, if you actually had to measure everybody's eyes, probably most eyes are different sizes in any event. So the bottom line is that we need one rule for everybody. So Amre, my kushya, 1 second, but why is it difficult? Maybe we should focus on what the actual use is. And here you took away the person's side. So Nahora Amarachman Nishkomine. And so person should take this person's sight away. To Elo Temaki. And after all, if you don't say that we focus on functionality rather than appearance, Hatan Shahara Gesagadol. If you have a small person who killed a big person, or the gadol, and Rashi specifically notes that we're not talking about a minor here, even though katan often means minor, we mean a small person. The gadol shaharach as a katan, or you have a big person who killed a small person. Heika kadlinale. How do you kill the murderer? It's a different sized person. It's not appropriate. So a Torah Omra, you're not going to be doing exactly what was done to the original person, to the original victim. So a Torah, and yet the Torah says, HaTorah Amra, Mishpat echad yelachem. You should have one law, Mishpat Hashem l'kuchem, one law for everybody. So what does it really clearly mean? El neshama shakamine. You took away the person's neshama, the person's soul. So neshama arachmana nishkamine. So we're going to take away that person's soul, and it doesn't make a difference what the size is. So hachanami. So here too, nahora shakamine, nahora amarachmana nishkamine. Actually, maybe we're going to say that, in fact, just as you take away one person's sight, you're going to take away the other person's sight. So the bottom line is that in this second brisa, it's not a good proof. We're not actually successful in definitively proving that only monetary damages create are what you're liable for if you do an injury to a person. So we will pick up with here at the third effort to try to prove that we're going to say only monetary damages and not actually causing and poking out the person's eye if the person poked out another person's eye, not doing an eye for an eye. But in order to see those additional reasons, you're going to need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And by the way, just so that you know, Dove is out for the next few weeks. So God willing, we'll be learning both in person and over Zoom on Monday through Friday for the next, I think, 3 weeks. So looking forward to being able to do that together. Have a great day.
Thank you.